All right, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle one of the biggest, most emotionally charged questions in all of personal finance. Is your primary home actually an investment?
You've heard this a million times, right? I mean, I know I have. It feels like it's carved in stone, something our parents and grandparents all told us. It sounds so solid, so responsible. It feels like the number one rule for building wealth.
But what if that idea, as comforting as it is actually a trap? What if it's quietly locking up your money and slamming the door on other, maybe even better, financial opportunities?
Welcome to the financial exit. If you're here for clear, calm, math-first thinking about your money, you are in the perfect spot. We're going to break down these big ideas so you can make smarter choices for yourself. So let's talk about what's really going on here. When we say we want to own a home, we're not just chasing a legal document. What we really want is stability, right? A safe place to live. We want our net worths to go up. And maybe most importantly, we want the flexibility to live our lives without feeling financially trapped. And that leads us to a really, really important distinction. Your primary home, the place you actually live, it pays you back in things like comfort and memories. Its real return on investment is non-financial. Think of it more like a consumption item, something you use. It's not a bad thing at all. It's just a different thing than a true wealth-building investment. See, that whole idea of a home being a simple, great investment, it really starts to break down when you look at all the hidden costs. There are these forces, I call them frictions, that are always working against your money. And we can break them down into four main types. You've got financial friction, liquidity friction, diversification friction, and finally, emotional friction. Each one of these chips away at that investment story we tell ourselves. So here's how they work. Financially, you're constantly paying out money for interest, taxes, insurance, and repairs, all of which eats into any profit. Your capital is also stuck. It's not liquid. I mean, you can't just sell your guest bathroom if a great business opportunity comes up, right? Then there's risk. All your eggs are in one basket, one house in one city. And emotionally, we justify spending tons of money on upgrades because, hey, we live here. But that brand new kitchen almost never adds the same amount of value when you sell. Okay, so how do we get around this? We just need a new way to think about it. A really simple framework that separates what you need for your life from what you need for your wealth. It's really this simple. Imagine you have two buckets. In one bucket, you have use assets. These are things like your home, your car, your couch. You judge them based on the quality of life they give you. The other bucket is for investment assets, stocks, bonds, things like that. You judge those purely on their financial return. Your home, it belongs firmly in that use asset bucket. Just having that clarity can change everything. All right, enough theory. Let's see how this actually plays out with some real numbers. We're going to run a simple showdown, a homeowner versus a renter over a 10-year period. No hype, no drama, just the calm math. So let's set the scene. We're going to use a $400,000 house for our example. Pretty typical price in a lot of places. Now, the homeowner needs an $80,000 down payment to buy this house. But our renter, they're going to take that exact same 80 grand and invest it in the stock market instead. And this right here is the huge opportunity cost that almost everyone forgets to calculate. So here's the setup. The homeowner's $80,000 is tied up in the house. Now, when you compare all the costs, mortgage, taxes, insurance for the owner versus just rent for the renter, it turns out our renter has an extra $705 every single month to invest on top of that initial $80,000. Okay, fast forward 10 years. The house has gone up in value, which is great. The homeowner sells it. After they pay the realtor fees, closing costs, and whatever's left on the mortgage, they walk away with a net profit of $155,000. Hey, not bad, right? But what about our renter? Well, that first $80,000 they invested, plus that extra $705 every month, all just growing and compounding in the market for 10 years, well, that turns into $282,000. And that, my friends, is the incredible power of keeping your capital liquid and letting it compound. Now look, the point of all this is not to say that buying a house is always a bad idea. It's absolutely not. It's just that it's a much more complicated decision than the old myth makes it sound. You just need a process to figure out what's best for you in your city right now. So here's a simple checklist you can use. 1. How long are you planning to stay put? If it's less than, say, 7 years, renting is almost always cheaper. 2. Compare the total annual costs of owning versus renting in your area. 3. For a quick gut check, calculate the price to rent ratio. And 4, and this is the most important one, no matter what you choose, keep your actual wealth building engine, your investment portfolio, separate and growing automatically. Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to this. Building true long-term wealth isn't about owning a single address. It's about owning productive assets, a tiny piece of thousands of businesses all around the world. If you can get that engine running, then the decision to buy a house becomes what it should be, a lifestyle choice, not a massive financial bet. So I'm really curious. Go run the numbers for your own town. What's the price to rent ratio where you live? Drop a comment below. I'd love to see what the data looks like for everyone watching. Hey, if this explainer helped you look at this problem in a new way, do me a favor and hit that like button. And be sure to subscribe so we can keep building these clear, powerful money habits together. Thanks so much for watching.